Cool. All right, guys, welcome back. Finally to Speed Up and Get Your Hits. It's been a minute, and guys, I hate to tell you, but the people have spoken. I get DMs like on the daily, and they just want all of us to stop like shooting and teaching classes and stuff, and just put out podcasts. So we're gonna have to figure that stuff out. But no, sorry guys for the delay. We all are busy per usual. My name is Billy. We run a training company called SpecTrain. If you're just finding the podcast with me, as always, I've got Nick from Velox Training Group and Brennan from Vortex Edge, and we do all find ourselves staying pretty busy, traveling around teaching classes and shooting a lot and that kind of thing. And that's kind of what this podcast is just about. It's about shooting by some shooters and guys that like to come together and talk about how to get better primarily. And so we hope that these conversations are educational for you guys. And I'm excited about some of the stuff we're going to be talking about tonight. And so without further ado, fellas, what's been going on? What you guys been working on?
Man, I've been doing something that's probably not for everyone, but I see some pretty decent value in it, and I think that it's helped me a little bit more up close, and that's 25-yard build drills. Trying to push 25-yard builds like sub 2.5 seconds. Like I've gotten a couple that are like a 188 that had 4 alphas, 2 charlies. The level of visual aggression that I find, like trying to push that type of pace at 25 yards is it's a lot, man. And so what I found is like doing that a couple times and then going up close. I think it makes the up close stuff really, really easy. And for those of you that have listened to the podcast before, you'll know that like the up close stuff is 100% the stuff that I don't like at all. But I think, again, it's the visual piece that I'm trying to get out of it. It's probably not for everyone to try to push that type of pace. I think that you have to be at, somewhat of a certain level to do that and kind of get something out of it. But yeah, I've been digging that stuff here lately.
So what I think is interesting maybe to talk about there, Nick, right? So, again, the numbers and the part times and the standards might not be applicable, right? But the idea of it, right? How did you arrive at 25-yard build drills as something you wanted to work on, and what were you trying to get out of it?
So the visual piece, 100%. Like if you're not making your vision like smaller, like I know we always talk about, hey, like pick a small spot or whatever, but like it's really about making your vision really, really small. And the further out you get, the more you will perceive your red dot to move. And so if your vision isn't looking to a very, very small spot and blocking out everything else out of that, you are not going to shoot accurately. And that's part of the thing that I really dig about that. Like it's weird. It's like that. It's the 25-yard mark for me personally. Like 20 yards, I don't feel it. 25, I 100% feel like if I am not looking to a very, very small spot and being aggressive or, not allowing my attention to come off of where I want those bullets to go, like it's not going to be good. So it's the visual piece that I'm trying to get out of that. And I find when I do the visual piece, like I could shoot really, really aggressively at that pace or at that distance. And I mean, I think that another thing that you would get out of that in training is like, if you can shoot at a very aggressive pace at 25, that's not to say that you're like, hey, do that in a match. But like, if I can shoot 20 splits at 25 at a tenth to that, and now I have 2 tight alphas in a match. It just like it becomes very, very comfortable when you can do that at that, distance. So
Yeah, that's good, and I think it's it's a couple interesting things you touched on there, right? So obviously, I think sometimes we get wrapped around standards and like other drills that other people came up with and the rules they assign to it, right? Build drills are usually thought of as an all alpha, like pass or fail type thing. I'm a big fan of that, right? I like developing sighting systems that at least in practice can guarantee you all alphas. I think that's a really cool thing. However, if you want to drastically move that window, just sitting there and shooting all alphas all day long is not going to get you any better, right? Like at a certain point, you have to push way past that. You have to get really uncomfortable. You got to start failing. Like, you talk about throwing a couple of Charlies. It's like, yeah, you know what? You probably should be throwing some Deltas on occasion and maybe a Mike every once in a while, just to figure out, hey, where are things falling apart? What are the things I need to work on here to get that goal that I want at 25? It's vision, but is it also grip? Is it also trigger? Like where are the parts
Mm-hmm.
that are falling apart? Where's the room to grow? And I think, and you can isolate. What's really cool is isolate little parts of it too. Like I worked for, a bulk of a range session couple months ago, trying to do two alphas from the draw in under a second at 25. And that was like really fun, and I was getting like 101 like a lot, and that kind of thing. But you can isolate. Okay, so where is it? If I want that 2 second or 2.5 second or whatever it is when I have your build drill, like where's the room, right? Is it on the draw? It can just getting the gun out faster going to help me? Is there room in the splits? Like where's the room to grow? And that's really cool for sure.
Yeah,
Almost-
People can apply that to different spots. You could start, shooting a head box build drill at 10, right? Maybe that's your level right now to kind of apply that same mindset to. But yeah, eventually, like we talked about, I mean, I think that visual challenge for sure gets different the farther you push it out. And people, I think, like you said, Nick, people don't necessarily understand the difference even 5 yards can make between 20 and 25. I mean, but that's like a 25% increase in difficulty just by distance alone, right? So it does make a huge difference for sure.
I feel like it's almost the next evolution of like doubles and pushing doubles back out to 20, 25 yards, which Nick, I know you've done a lot of that, right? And you've talked about it on the podcast before. But like I've done that a good bit as well. Haven't focused as much on the build drills, but I know when I do doubles from like 7, 10, 15, the next iteration of working kind of the same idea of, hey, is my gun returning consistently? Are my grip pressures correct? Am I looking in the right spot? Is like, let's string it together with more rounds. And so I'm either then going to add multiple targets or just multiple rounds to kind of force myself to stay focused for longer than just 2 shots and then the luxury of a pause and then another 2 shots. So, I mean, I think that's cool that you're pushing it back and stringing it together and forcing yourself to be locked in for a little bit longer because, I mean, in my opinion, from what I've seen, that is where things start to fall apart is just like, yeah, I can do 2. That's really good. Now can you do 2, 2, and 2, right? Which is a build drill, right? So that's cool, man. I think that's valuable for sure. Yeah. So I actually every time we film a podcast, I'm in a different spot. But I'm at work. I was staying late to shoot. Totally forgot they were doing a podcast tonight. So I'm in the office after hours. But I was just on the range shooting, and I don't know, probably worked through maybe 300-400 rounds. Yeah, some of the stuff that I'm working on these days is kind of having to do with a little bit with match mode. I know we've kind of beat match mode to death a little bit, but I always feel like I'm figuring out a different way to practice in match mode or to execute stuff in match mode. I know I've talked about it some in the past, but what I'm doing now is, all right, so I've got a course of fire. I'm trying to make it all super random and not repeating something over and over, kind of like standard style, always just trying to mix it up. I'll pick something and I'll look at it and go, all right, so what's kind of the speed I want to shoot this at? What would I be really happy with? And I kind of try to set an aggressive pace for it, right? And then the second time I go back and I shoot all alphas and like really good hits. And then the third time I shoot it or shoot a similar thing, right? I'm going to mix up the target order a little bit, but I'm going to shoot it trying to find that middle ground. And I've done this a lot before, but I've always felt that middle ground is actually a very big piece of middle ground where I can shoot something in speed mode, I can shoot something in like ultimate points mode, right? And then there's like this fairly big no man's land in there where that you could call match mode, right? And what I found for myself is like in speed mode, I know that at like 7 yards, I can do 14 splits on a target pretty easily, right? When I go to a match and I've got a freaking open 5 yard target, I will either send like 12, 13, 14 splits on that thing and have like meh hits, Alpha Charlie. Maybe it's even just like a really close tux, Alpha freaking Mike because it was in the Charlie, right? Or I go to that aggressive target that should be an attack target and I'm like, oh man, I really do need points because this stage requires me to shoot points. And so then I slow way down and I'm doing like 25s and 30s on an open target that in practice I can rip off sub 15, right? And so that middle ground for me is so large, and I'm trying to figure out how do I get up to where my match mode is way closer to my speed mode than it is to just like slow fire collect points mode, right? So that's what I've been working on. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but it's like if I'm capable of 14s and then all the points is like 25s, like I should probably get 2 alpha with like 18s, right? At like those nice, easy open targets. And I find it's those little things that trip me up a lot. I'll review my match footage and go, what the heck am I doing on these targets? I'm either ripping into them and the hits are whatever, or slowing way down. I'm like, I know I can do better than that. And when I do put it together like that, that's when my shooting feels super controlled. I'm calling correct confirmation levels within the correct, acceptable target area. I'm actually seeing a streak of red inside the alpha. I see a streak when I do 14s. I also still see a streak when I do 18s, but I feel a lot more controlled, right? With the, 0.4 or 0.04, 0.05 second difference.
Well, it seems to me like if we're talking about like splits or whatever, like those 14s, that's like exploration mode. And like if you wanted to shoot really good points, but still shoot like at a good pace to actually like win a match, like 18s would be the way to go, right? And if you could shoot 14s, those 18s should feel very, very comfortable.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'd even say not even exploration mode. It's just like I just can pull the trigger that fast. And in practice, like probably 90% of the time, I'll get 2 alpha, right? But so exploration mode for me is maybe like 12s, right? Where I'm just really exploring with tension and all these different things. It's so that's where I feel like that middle ground is actually much bigger than I've made it out to be in the past. It's not just like points, match, and speed, right? It's like, nope, there's like you can refine that match mode down. So I think it's worth figuring out for some people, and a good way to break stuff down on the timer and actually figure stuff out like in sort of a match setting almost.
There's a couple interesting things you hit on there, Brennan, that I think I found to be really interesting. One of which is the difference between, kind of the stand and deliver shooting that a lot of people do in practice, where you are, setting up totally square with your targets directly downrange and your perfect shooting stance, totally stable, that kind of thing, versus what we actually do in more dynamic courses of fire and matches and that kind of thing, where you're either shooting on the move, you're shooting coming in and out of a position, or even if you are fully stopped, right, a lot of times you're not in your ideal shooting stance. You might be leaned around a vision barrier. You might have your feet prepped up to exit out of position, like to the rear or at a weird angle, as efficiently as possible. And that can absolutely change how the gun behaves, right? And so that changes up, I think, our calculations as far as when predictive shooting actually works well and when it doesn't. The other interesting thing I think that happens there is as a part of that, folks tie in sort of transition speed with trigger speed. So in other words, if when I have targets really close downrange and I've run through a drill several times and I know exactly the spacing between targets and stuff, yeah, it's super easy to predictively throw a gun from one target to another like exactly with the right speed and just know it's going to stop on the right spot. But all of a sudden, when I'm a little bit less comfortable and my stance isn't perfect, and I've got to take that little bit of extra visual confirmation on target to make sure the gun's stopped in the right spot, then I do it for a split as well. I take that same confirmation for the second shot as well, even if I don't need to. And of course, those things are completely separate. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting things there as far as trying to make, I think, your training as realistic as possible. I've really tried here recently, especially, to try to do like basically no shooting, like in my perfect shooting stance. Like it's just because how useful is that, bro? Like other than classifiers, you know what I mean? Like we find it there on occasion, but other than that, like where it counts is not standing still, like lined up square to your targets. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff there for sure as far as figuring out, man, how do you actually make sure you're connecting things that you're doing in training to actually be able to deploy them on the match. You're right, we see it all the time. You and I were talking about it recently. We were up shooting with Donnie in Chicago, and it was like, man, sometimes you see like we had like a 2-yard open target set up, right? And occasionally dudes are just like throwing quarter-second splits on it, right? Just because it's like you don't think about it. And part of it is, like you said, that difference in the mental game when you're actually on a match and it counts and you actually want points and that kind of thing. And part of it is, I think, probably just a lack of planning too. Like, from a standpoint of like, did you actually say to yourself before you went in there, like, hey, that is a confirmation 1 target. Here's what needs to look like. Here's how I'm going to pull the trigger on that target, like ahead of time. And I know for sure, like a lot of people, I know some you guys probably do a great job of that, but a lot of people are not doing that. For sure, on every target, because I see jaws drop in every one of my level up courses. I start talking about assigning confirmation levels to every target on the stage, and people are like, "What?" But yeah, it's hugely important if you actually want to engage every target correctly, for sure.
And I think one thing that helps that out in practice, and one thing that I've been doing too a lot lately, is like instead of just standing there and shooting doubles, like on the beep, draw the gun in your perfect position or whatever. Like, dude, I've been setting up like ports at like 20 yards, something like that, with like a lean. I'll put like a fault line there. And then like on the beep, run into that port and shoot a set of doubles. Like it changes things significantly, man. I'm not saying that like everyone should go do this, but like I think that if you can do doubles like pretty well, like if you could isolate that specific drill, it's probably a good idea to start setting up like, throw some fault lines on the ground with some leans and maybe some low ports and like run into that port on the beep and then shoot some doubles. Like it's pretty eye-opening. And I think it'll show you like how your entry is as well. Like shoot it like you're going to shoot it in a match.
Yeah. And even if you don't have like a ton of resources, right? Like you can do this shooting in your lane at the indoor range. Like just for starters, shoot with your right foot in front sometimes. Right? or like stand stand upright in the left side of the lane and like as you draw, lean to the right side and just like shoot leaned over a little bit and watch how it changes how the gun behaves, right? And for some people, like where your impacts are, like for sure. It's you got to do that kind of stuff, and like you said, do it in doubles, do it in larger arrays as well. But yeah, it's super beneficial, I think.
Agreed. Yeah, Billy, I think the thing that you said too, that is probably almost another topic in and of itself, but the idea that they're like predictive transitions are a thing and that transition times and predictive splits on targets are not the same thing. Like that's pretty interesting. But when you start thinking about not so much about the time and what the timer is going to read, but more of what it's going to look like, if you know that you can accept a streak of red on an open target and you're transitioning onto that, then you should be able to accept a streak of red streaking into the target left or right as well. And you don't have to see that stop dot. Like I think that's a thing that people do a lot of times is they can double tap a target real fast and be like, yep, I was shooting a streak, whatever, right? And then they transition over to that second target and they go confirmation 3. and then confirmation 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if it's 3, the temptation then is to go, confirmation 1, confirmation 3, stop dot center of the target, and then like confirmation 2. And that's where you're getting all
Yeah.
those like stupid 0.2 to 0.3 splits on
Yeah.
5-yard targets, right?
But we have to be honest about it though, right? So as an example, like you're just talking about predictive shooting, and then you're talking about like shooting a streak. And to me, those are two massively different ideas, right? Because, if I'm shooting, as an example, a 7-yard open target with the 10 splits, right? People will shoot that fast and then say, "Oh, I'm shooting a streak." No, you're not, because your trigger control at speed split was like a 0.15, right? So you cannot in a tenth of a second see where the streak is on the target and go, yes, that streak is where I want it to be, and then pull the trigger. You can't do it. So what you're doing is you may have seen it where it was for the first shot, but then you just pulled the trigger twice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, shooting a streak,
it's definitely not
on a transition, shooting a streak on a transition where you're seeing the dot come onto the target and you're timing that, maybe you start pressing the trigger, as the dot crosses that A zone perf or whatever. Yeah, to me, 100% that's a thing in matches, for sure. But at the same time, people try to do a much more aggressive transition than that, like an actual predictive where they're just like, I'm just going to throw the gun and I'm just not going to press the trigger when the gun gets there type thing. And they're not waiting for any kind of visual confirmation, right? And again, when you have muscle memory and like a pre-set up drill and that kind of thing, a lot of times you can get away with that, I think, at distances that you cannot get away with that for real, when you have kind of unknown degrees and maybe you're coming into a position and you're not in your perfect shooting stance and all those kind of variables, right? So lot to think about and play around with for sure.
Yeah, terminology matters a lot. I guess, like, all what is it? All rectangles are squares, or squares are rectangles, but the other way around, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a similar thing. Like you can recognize a streaking dot, but you're not reacting to the streak coming back down to time to decide to shoot press the trigger. But you can recognize that your dot was streaking up and down in an appropriate area. So good distinction there, but they are different.
And that's the concept a lot of people miss, right? They think that either like they link seeing something and reacting to it, and it's like, no, bro. Like, I can shoot a bill drill with sub 13 splits, right? And there's no reacting to sight picture happening there, but I'll also see that shot 3 was over in the right Charlie. So you can see it and know what happened after the fact. That doesn't mean I was reacting to where the dot was every time. It's just like, hey, it was in front of my face, so I was going to see it even if I didn't have time to like change things in the moment, right?
Right, exactly.
So yeah, two very different ideas for sure. Yeah. Cool. I had, not to pivot too far off all that, but I had a pretty interesting discussion with a dude recently about classes that I thought might be interesting to folks, and just the idea of what should we be getting out of classes? What is kind of the point of a class? What is the value you are looking to take home from a class? And I think that this potentially, I'm really interested to get your guys' feedback on some of this too, because I think this, in my mind, what you're looking for out of a class changes dramatically based upon your experience and skill level. And it's something that we don't actually talk about a whole lot, right? It's funny, this discussion actually started because of a conversation on standards and how standards should be set up and stuff. And one of the things a guy DM'd me, he was like, hey, bro, he's like, the way I think about it is if every student that comes through your class can't pass your standards by the end of class, well, then how good of an instructor are you? And I said, that's interesting, right? So here's the question that I asked him back. I was like, hey, so out of a class, is your goal for a class as a shooter to have a measurable increase in skill by the time you leave that class? This is, I think, a very common idea. It's the way a lot of classes are marketed, right? I will make you better by the time you leave this class, right? Interesting concept. Here's kind of my take on it, right? I think when you are, especially when you're first starting, it's almost unavoidable to not be better by the time you leave a class, because you've just shot like some number hundreds of rounds, and like when you're first starting, like it's really hard to go shoot 300 rounds and like not be better than you were before you started, right? So like at a certain level, especially if you're learning new techniques and you're getting coaching, like you may literally completely be changing the way you shoot by the time you leave that course, but versus when you came in. And so yes, maybe you will get better, like be measurably better if you came back in the next day and shot the cold start drill again for the class, right? You may measurably be better on day 2 than you were on day 1. That is a thing. But is that even the goal, right? My take on it very simply is like, man, I tell students this kind of at the beginning of classes, like it's not possible for me in 8 hours or 16 hours or how much time we have together on the range to take you from where you are right now to the shooter that you want to be. Like there's simply not enough time. There's no substitute for putting the work in, no matter how good of an instructor I am or how snazzy the drills I come with for my special class are. Like it's not going to remove the requirement for like years of work and like thousands of rounds and all that kind of stuff to really get you where you want to be if you want to be an elite shooter. So my goal then for my students, usually kind of leaving a class, is if I could boil it down to the smallest mission state possible, is to leave with as much homework as I can possibly give them. Like I want the class to essentially inform their training plan for at least a year, if not more, right? I want to give them enough to work on. So generally for blocks of instruction, like my take on it is like, hey, I want to give them as much information as I can about how to do the thing, make sure they understand how to do the thing, and audit any obvious deficiencies. And then like in my mind, a class is not a place to like spend hours repping out an isolated skill. Like you can go do that tonight at the hotel and try fire like once we're done. You don't need for me to sit here and watch you rep that out for 3 hours. Like I would rather squeeze in as much learning and as much information into a class as I possibly can. For me as a shooter, obviously I think when you first start, like doing the shooting and going through the motions is definitely a big part of the learning process for sure. And you need someone watching you and making sure that you're being honest with yourself, and that you are actually doing the thing and that you understand how to do the thing. All that's important. These days, man, like I think I would pay just as much if I could just like go to a JJ class or an Eric class or like whatever, one of the best top guys out there, and like not even put a gun on for 2 days, but just listen to them and like watch them demo everything for 2 days. Like I feel like I would pay just as much for that, if not more, than some class I go to and shoot 1,000 rounds over 2 days with some teaching interspersed into it, right? Because for me, that's what I'm there for. I'm not there to shoot. I shoot a lot on my own. I'm not at the class to just go shoot, right? I'm there to learn from somebody who knows some stuff that hopefully I don't know, or get some different perspectives. So I don't know. What do you guys think, man? What are you looking for when you go to a class? What is your goals? What are your takeaways for yourself and your students? Am I way off base? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I structure my classes the exact same way that you were talking about, right? Like I'm not like I care about your performance at the class, right? But what I care more about is if you know why you're doing what you're doing. Because if you know that stuff, then you can go home and change it. But like coming to a class thinking that you're going to quote unquote like perform, and one of us is going to magically make you better. I don't know. I think it's the wrong mindset to have to come take a class, honestly. It's
Yeah.
like when I take a class, I'm looking for 6 months to a year's worth of homework to go work on,
Mm-hmm.
like straight up.
Yep.
And also too, I can't remember the last class I took where I felt my performance was really great because at a class, like you're trying new things and to expect that the new thing to be mastered in such a short amount of time, I think is not even reasonable. So I don't know. That's just my take.
Yeah. Regardless of whether you mastered it or not, I mean, if you're shooting in match mode, like out of class, like you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're training. This is where you push to failure, like on purpose, right? So yeah, I approach it the exact same way for sure.
Yeah, I think it's like I think the classes that have you shoot a set of standards or something like that at the end of class almost forces the shooter, if they're like somewhat decent, to just go back to how they know how to shoot before they came to your class, right?
Hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
the whole day you might be pushing them, and like we have a final drill in all of our classes, right? Just we want to score something, we want to give away a prize, whatever, right? But what I tell people is like, just I want you to focus on, and maybe it's just a flaw in our curriculum, right? And maybe it's something that we have to revisit. But something like I always tell the students is like, hey man, like just focus on what you know you need to do to like get the points,
Mm.
right? And usually by the final drill, I'm going, my brother in Christ, shoot alphas, right? And we might have worked on a lot of different stuff, and the final drill may include, little elements of everything we worked on. But at the end of the day, I really want them to just shoot points, and then go, like you guys said, go and work on that stuff, and like come back for pistol 2 or whatever, and be a much better shooter because they put in all the work. But like I think it's almost a flaw in how classes are set up, especially if there's standards, and especially if there's some sort of like clout associated with achieving said standards. Um, you're going to push me all these next 2 days to do this your way and to try things and to keep an open mind, and you know um, all this stuff. But then when it comes to actually performing, like I'm going to go back to what I have the most reps on, and essentially I'm going to try to get your standards shooting the way that I already knew how before I came to take your class. Like it would almost
Mm-hmm.
be cooler if you went and trained with that guy and he didn't give you any standard to try, and then on your second class with him, you got to just start the
Yeah.
class that way. You know,
Right. Yeah.
is that practical? Probably not, right? But
Alumni show up an hour early.
Yeah.
Alumni only. That's actually a really cool idea.
yeah,
Yeah, I dig
I
but
it.
mean, this is
almost
this is
everybody
why
sets their
like
class up that way.
yeah. This is why like I have standards, but like every time like right before we do the standards, I always ask people like, how many times do you guys think I practice these standards? And usually people are like, all the time. And I'm like, never.
Never. Yep.
Never. It's a culmination of other shit. Like
Yep.
if I pass, I pass. If not, like I really don't care. Like we're not at the class for the standards. It'd be cool if I passed in front of everybody, which usually happens, but like again, I'm not out practicing these specific standards because they're not anything that's going to get me better. Like things that we
Yeah.
practiced in class are going to get you better.
That's such a key point. I think. I mean, you both kind of touched on it, right? But I think there's a difference in, hey, man, here's a. By the way, here's a quick little drill that's going to measure our ability to apply some of the skills we worked on today, and if you do good, you get a patch. Okay, cool. There's a difference between that and people who are like, when you get in the mindset of people like traveling across the country to come take your class specifically to pass your standards, it makes it really difficult for learning to occur, like in course, like in class, like you were saying, Brennan, because it's all about like, hey, I'm just warming up for this standards drill, right? You're not. It's really difficult to try new stuff and really completely change the way you do things, because again, that probably is going to result in an initial degradation at higher levels, right? It's going to result in an initial degradation of performance when you completely change the way you're doing something. Um, again, it's very. I think this is where another thing that changes depending on kind of what your level, right? When you have folks come into your class that are like not gripping the gun at all, right? When they come in, like they're not gonna see a degradation in skill by starting to grip the gun, right? It's gonna immediately improve their shooting. But at higher levels, like when you have, you're just like, hey man, maybe you should try, applying torque to the grip of the gun. There's just a very slight tweak to something. Yeah, you're not used to it yet, and something new to try. But anyway, guys, something interesting to think about, I think, for folks as you look for classes to take, and kind of look at how classes are set up. But it's also, for me, it's important to have an important mindset overall when you take classes and you are looking to get the most value out of it. It's all about leaving, again, in my mindset, it's really simple, leaving with as much homework as you possibly can, which for me, I hope I don't sound like an instructor beating a dead horse here, but like, for me, absolutely involves recording as much information as I possibly can. The value that I get out of a course, if I go take a bunch of notes or video all the instructional blocks or take pictures of all the drills or like record all that information in some way, shape, or form, versus just go take it and have a good time and joke with my buddies in between reps, is massively different. I learned this, my first time ever taking a course. It was one of those, man, is you go take it, and when you're in the course, it just feels like I am never going to forget any of this. Like, this is so awesome. Here's this whole list of all the things I need to work on. I want to work on that drill and this thing and the other thing, and I'm going to remember the way that he articulated that thing. And for me, it's literally like, man, you go to bed and you wake up the next morning and it's just like half of it's gone. Like, and it was just lost to the wind. And ever since then, I've started, either, like I said, taking a bunch of notes, or these days I kind of end up discreetly just like videoing the entire class for the most part when I take a class, just so I have it all, and can watch it over and over again and go back and take notes after the fact and really digest it all. That's to me the where I get the value out of it, for sure. I remember my first time taking a class with JJ. We worked on his little attack control array with movement between two boxes and some specific exits and entries and that kind of thing. And I mean, man, I come home from that class, my first range session back, and it's like I set up two boxes and I set up the exact target array, and I ran that thing for probably 4 hours straight before I had like one run. I was like, okay, that didn't totally suck, but the expectation that you're just gonna be able to master stuff at that level. I feel like if you feel like you're leaving a class having mastered the the drills, the challenges, and the concepts that were taught, it probably was not high enough level information or concepts for you. Because you shouldn't be able to do that over the course of a 1 or 2 day class. So
I would say too, like if the instructor is making that claim, like you will leave my class a better shooter than you came, like that should probably give you a clue as to the level of skill of the instructor as well, and the level of depth of topics that he's going to get into. It's probably going to be pretty like copy paste, lowest common denominator type stuff, in my experience. The guys who are like, listen, this is how I do it. If you dig it, cool. If not, whatever. Like, I'm like, okay, I'll listen to what you have to say. It's not always the case. That could also be the makings of a very, very, very bad class. But yeah.
Yeah, or just an indication, right, of the sort of the average skill level of the average student that attends that course, right? Like, I feel like, some instructors don't have, the privilege of having like super high level shooters in your class that make you go, okay, I'm gonna have to work for it today, bro. Like this is it's about to go down, and so that's a very different experience, I think. as an instructor, and so it
I
changes your
think
perspective.
I think your philosophy of like taking classes and why you're taking classes is important as well. Like I
Mm-hmm.
know some really good dudes who do care about getting better, but maybe not at the obsessive level that I do, who
Right.
love taking classes and like that's just what they enjoy spending their money on. And like they will
Mm-hmm.
travel and follow, couple handful of instructors around the country, go take classes
Mm-hmm.
with them, like super far away, multiple times a year, whatever. And they're going to drop a bunch of money on it. And they just love to be in that environment and have range days and just be with other dudes and just like shooting the shit and shooting bullets and all that stuff. And like that's
Yep.
fine, like if that's your thing. But I think the three of us are very much like don't really have time to go take just like a crap load of classes, and so got to get the most out of it. And if you're like that, then all that stuff that was just said is like super good practice.
Yeah. It's not a time thing for me. It's more of like I'm really picky about who I take classes with because of the information that's being given. So like I say, like I want 6 months to a year's worth of homework, and like if you can't give me that, you're not on my list. And it's not to sound like a dickhead, but like I'm just not interested at this point. Like I'm at a point where it's like I just want more information, and it's probably going to be like the little stuff to level up more. No more big takeaways.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
just me personally.
Fewer and fewer, the better you get, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a tough balance. I think because we've sort of rebounded. I think in the training market from for a while there. I think the trend in training courses was just like more words is better, and it's just a lot of talking and a lot of storytelling without necessarily efficiently transferring information. And so
Well,
to counter that, we kind of rebounded to like, hey man, you shouldn't be standing up there talking for 20 minutes. I came here to shoot, right? And there's some value to that, like perspective as well. But it's a balance, right? I will sit there and listen to someone talk for a half hour if that's a half hour of like chock full of good information that I need. If it's like I said, stories or just whatever that's going around in circles talking about the same thing or talking about rods and cones. Like I don't care, bro. Like I came here to shoot.
mm-hmm.
I started saying that same thing, right? And so yeah, it's interesting balance. You don't want to it's not necessarily a lecture series when you come out to a class, but it is primarily for me. I think the transfer of information is really the prime goal for sure. So
Yeah, but
it's
like
One of them.
if
Oh, go ahead.
if you think about it, like teaching people how to train themselves when they leave and teaching them like things that are very, very important and things that they should, be aware of, it's actually a horrible
Mhm.
business model. Like it'd
Yeah.
be better just to like tell people stories and seem really cool so they would come back. But
Give a man a
yeah.
fish, teach a man to fish, right? Like, yeah.
It
I
puts pressure on you as the instructor because if they come back next year, you better have like some new stuff and some
Yeah,
higher level level of skill to show off because
100%.
they're gonna come back. Those kind of dudes are gonna come back a year later better than they were last time for sure. And that's when you better have stepped your game up as an instructor as well, which is it's not everybody is signed up for, but
Mm-mm.
gets me excited for sure.
Billy, to your point of like how long instructors are talking about stuff, one of the more recent classes that I attended, my brother just like kept yammering on and like at one point, like I'm pretty sure I did fall asleep actually, um, and yeah, it was kind of unfortunate. We were sitting down like in a
Yeah.
classroom portion of it, and like yeah, I did fall asleep. But then like at Eric's class a couple months ago, like there were some blocks that he went on and on for like a good long while. like at
Yeah.
least half an hour, maybe 40 minutes on one of
Mm-hmm.
them. And of course, he's getting a lot of interaction, a lot of questions and stuff. But that stuff was like, I was like, that's not long enough. Like we got
No.
done with the block. I'm like, I still have questions,
Yeah.
and
Exactly. Yeah.
it was new enough information, or at least it was being presented in a different enough way that it was totally applicable. And I don't think anybody was standing there going, bro, let's just shoot, right? Like everybody wanted to hear what he had to say. And if you are one of those guys and you have that student instructor combo, like I would have been happy with shooting 500 less rounds in that class,
100%.
right? And
Yeah, that's
continue
what I'm saying.
listening. But the class that I like fell asleep in, like I kind of wish we had just been on the range the entire time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it varies greatly.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to be on the range the entire time.
Quality of the content, quality of the delivery, all that stuff matters, right?
You run out of ammo if you're on the range the whole time.
Well, it's harder for the instructor to be on the range the entire time. Like actually talking about, things that are going to make people better and demoing shit, like, and it's way easier just to like tell some stories.
Yeah.
Man, I can't imagine spending 3 hours of the day in an air conditioned classroom telling stories. That sounds like a pretty chill setup right there. I'm not gonna lie. Not to talk any crap about people with air conditioning and classrooms or anything,
But the stories, yes.
We just have air conditioning on the range, man.
Cool. Well, we kind of bounced all over tonight, guys, but hopefully there was some helpful nuggets in there for folks. We're gonna try to get another episode on the schedule before I let these guys go tonight, and we'll get one out here hopefully in the near future. But if you guys have questions for us or topics that you would like us to address on future episodes, please feel free to drop those below. And also check out the information for all of these guys on the podcast here tonight. Appreciate them being here. Make sure you check them out, follow them on the social medias, all that kind of thing, and take a chance to stream with us if you get a chance. I'm not going to promise we'll make you better, but I promise you won't regret it. That's about the best I'll say. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.